I'm not teaching, I'm publicly learning. But hi and welcome to Learning for the Life in the UK test part 62. Oliver Cromwell and the English Republic. We are on page 29. While doing morning stretching, let's participate in morning stretching. Oliver Cromwell was a general of a parliamentary army fighting in the civil war between the Cavaliers with the king against the Roundheads and the parliament of a dispute. They had a dispute for some time going, but now the final reason of a civil war, which couldn't be avoided by 1642 and began there, was that the king needed money to raise an army and the parliament wasn't giving him the money. And they used it as an opportunity to say, we want the control over the army, otherwise we will give you not the army which we will then control, after we have given you the army to defend our own country or something like that. Now, Oliver Cromwell was general of his parliamentary army who had won and had also executed Charles I in 1649. And he was sent to Ireland, where he established the English authority, but he did that in a violent manner, so that he is still a controversial figure now 400 years later in Ireland. And we have a picture of Oliver Cromwell. I'm showing it again. And it's still bordered. The Scots had not agreed to the execution. So let's get a one after one way explaining us what happens in Ireland and in Scotland. The Scots had not agreed to the execution of Charles I and declared his son Charles II to be king. So they invaded Scotland. That was the main reason that Charles I needed the money, but they weren't happy that he was executed. I mean, it makes sense. So why did now the king need so urgently the money if the Scottish army wasn't there to execute him and weren't agreeing with him being executed and wanted his son to be king? If there was such a big threat to the king, why did the king now so urgently need the money to assemble an army against the Scottish troops if the parliament would get the control over the army permanently? And they were against his execution, which the parliament then did, and they even made his son the new king. So what opportunity did the parliament have? They weren't so much behind. That was a little theory I had in between sometime, that they were so much after the king and not after the parliament. But they were at least not after his head, as the parliament then was, it took some years for that to happen, and they made his son the new Charles II. Let's read on. He was crowned Sir Charles II, crowned King of Scotland, and led the Scottish army into England. So, okay, at least makes sense. As far as war ever could make sense. So Charles II now was crowned King of Scotland, and he led a Scottish army into England. So another invasion from Scotland. Cromwell defeated this army in the Battle of Dunbar and Worcester. So we have a Battle of Mastmoor-Nesby. It must be around 1643. We have no date. No, we don't have a date. Where the king's army lost under Charles I. Now we have another battle. That is the Battle of Dunbar and Worcester. So the battles, two battles of Dunbar and the Battle of Worcester. There now Charles I won. But it was a Scottish army, not a second English army against another English army. It was a Scottish army, led by the son of the one who led the first English army. And he won against this Oliver Cromwell, who had in Ireland established the English authority. Charles II escaped from Worcester. I have written it wrong. Read it wrong. Cromwell defeated this army. Yes, I read it wrong. So father and son both defeated by the parliamentary army, maybe both under Cromwell. Cromwell defeated this army in the battles of Dunbar and Worcester, so father and son lost. Let's make it fast together. We have both Mary of the Scots, and the Bloody Mary, both Catholic, and divorced King Henry VIII, both from abroad, the one from Germany, Anne of Cleves, and the one from Spain, Catherine of Aragon, the first and the fourth, the other way around when I said it. And Charles I lost against the parliamentary army in which Cromwell was a general, and Charles II, made by Scotland to the king, lost also against the parliamentary army or the army of the Republic, which is called the Commonwealth, in which the army had to rule, and Cromwell was an important general. He lost against that. So far, that's lost. Let's do a bit of stretching. We're having just a comfortable standing with the legs. We are breathing in, and we're making forward shoulder circles. And forward shoulder circles going back of the shoulders. Then up and front and down. You might even think of them as 4-point shoulder circuits. That's oftentimes more effective. And now the other way around, we are making backward shoulder circuits. So we're going in front, up, back, up, down. And the next exercise, we are breathing in and lifting the shoulders up. And we're breathing out and letting them fall down. Breathing in and lifting the shoulders up. And out and letting the shoulders fall. And again in. And out. Again in. And out. And again in. And out. And to the next exercise, we got the plugger, both thumbs up. And we're pretending to, one after another, reach for an apple hanging high on an apple branch, to pluck it, to turn it a bit around, to chip it off, and that way to harvest some apple fruits. And a few times more. And the last 1 and 2. Let's look if we can make a short thing here. So Charles II was defeated by the parliamentary army as well as his father Charles I. Charles II escaped from Worcester, so there was one of the battles, Battle of Dunbar and Battle of Worcester. Famously hiding in an oak tree on one occasion, and eventually fled to Europe. So one thing is famous about Charles I, that he was the last monarch to take a foot into the parliament. Was he also the first? We don't know what. He was the last. So, according to them, since 400 years no monarch has entered the House of Commons. And Charles II, famous about him is that he hid in an oak at one time after the Battle of Augustus. And he eventually fled to Europe. An oak is a tree, so inside of the trunk of the tree where you're sometimes hollow. And eventually fled to Europe. So he fled to Europe. You know also that Mary Stuart lived a childhood in France, and we know that but Mary Stuart fled to England. So Mary Stuart lived a childhood in France. So we have another monarch or another important person. Yes, she was a monarch. Mary Scotland was Queen of Scotland. And with 1 month of age, she spent her life in France. So one monarch in France. And when Mary Stuart had to fled after she had returned from France, when her husband was murdered and she was accused of having a part in the murderment, then she had fled to England, where she did not receive help. She was imprisoned by Elizabeth I, who suspected her of wanting to overthrow or to take over the English throne, and then 20 years later, when she was accused of wanting to do so, executed. But we have now, after Mary Stuart, the second British monarch in Europe. So Charles II, he fled after the Battle of Worcester, and one time he hid in an oak and he fled to Europe. Parliament now controlled Scotland as well as England and Wales. Not Ireland. There was the English rule made by establishing the authority of the English Parliament. That was done with a lot of violence. He's unliked, but he is not hidden. Maybe we should just read on, but we can't always read on. If we read on, how can we come back? So we cannot read on without understanding what we have read. So we have now to talk about Ireland. So the parliamentary army of the parliament was ruling Wales, Scotland and England. What about Ireland? There, Cromwell of the parliamentary army established English authority, which made him, because he had done it with violence, a controversial figure. We don't know anything about that. There is a missing link in the story. Now we are having the legs standing wide apart. I guess it comes in the next section, but we have to understand that section before we go into the next one. We are bringing the arms up. And we're breathing out, and we're doing a shifter and shifting over to one side. And breathing in into the middle, and out over to the other side. Breathe in into the middle, and out over to the other side. And again in into the middle, and out over to the other side. And again in into the middle, and out. We're going down with the hands onto the knees. We are breathing in, and we're breathing out, and we're bringing one shoulder in front. And we're breathing in and back, and out and now the other one. And again in, out one shoulder in front. Again in, and out for last time, shoulder in front. Breathing in, we will do mostly no stretching. Breathing in, and out and back, going down. We're breathing in, going to one leg. And we're breathing out and going to the other leg. Breathing in, coming back into the middle. And the breathing out, we're coming slowly up and back. And now we're having the toes of the feet pointing to the outside, and an ulnar space between our heels, so an ulnar length space between the heels. We're breathing in and lifting the hands up and out. And we're placing the elbows against the inside of the knees. And we're breathing in and we're straightening up the back. And we're breathing out and we're coming under the back. We're breathing in and out, and we're coming back into the garland pose. We're breathing in and straighten up the back. And out, we're coming up with the back. Again in. And out, back into the middle. Again in. And out, we're coming slowly up in one straight line. So we'll still at some time talk about the Roman numbers, and I had something said about the length. So in the United Kingdom there is miles used. I haven't looked it up, but it's still something like 2/3. So 1 kilometer, 1.3 miles or something like that, and 1 mile, 1.3 kilometers. And measured is often in feet, so 4 feet or something, 1 meter. There's the 70-meter long Bordeaux tapestry on which the Battle of Hastings from 1066 is portrayed, and that is 230 feet, so 4 feet or 1 meter. There's the Bordeaux tapestry again, and that thing is 230 meters long. We're doing the next exercise. We are placing one here above the knee of a standing glutes, only if you can do it without injuring yourself. You're breathing in, out and we're sinking down, so 4 feet are 1 meter, and 1 mile are 1.3 kilometers. But I don't think we will explain it in detail, and I don't know it exactly. I'm going to go back later to the Roman numbers. But feet, I wanted to say that it is a fixed measure. So it's not like everyone has a different feet length. There is said how much feet are how many centimeters. That is not something just said. Everyone has a different feet length. Feet have a fixed length, and around 4 feet are 1 meter. And I'm using this length, the ulnar length, because everyone has a different ulnar length. Here's the ulnar, there are 2 bones, the radius and the ulnar. The ulnar is this bone here in the lower arm, as a measurement for the distance of the heels of the feet with the garland pose, because everyone has a different ulnar length, and it fits pretty good. So maybe someone has a very long lower arm, and maybe have to do it, or a shorter lower arm. So it fits pretty good. Everyone has an ulnar length, and it's different. And so people can measure what length we're going to need when we do the garland pose. We're doing the closing exercise, the trumpet glider again. And we're breathing in and going down. And out. And again in. And out. Breathe in. And out. Again in. And out. And again in. And out. So the Parliament was ruling in England, Scotland, and Wales after they have defeated Charles I, the King of Charles II. They have also defeated Charles I. Charles II in the battles of Dunbar and Worcester. Charles I fled. He was one time in an oak to Europe, and the Parliament was ruling England, Scotland, and Wales. And let's not read the first sentence. Let's keep wondering. There is the 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth word is Ireland, so we will maybe know about Ireland. I thank you very much. I don't have to, and until next time.